When The Force Awakens hit theaters, Star Wars felt alive again. Crowds cheered as Han and Chewie stepped back onto the Falcon. Fans argued about Rey's lineage and Snoke's plan. And for the first time in years, it felt like the galaxy was wide open waiting to be explored. It was not a flawless film, but it was a smart one. It played safe by echoing A New Hope, but it gave audiences what they needed. A reminder of why Star Wars mattered. New heroes to root for, old legends to anchor them, and mysteries that kept fans theorizing for years. That was the magic spark that reignited the saga. Then came The Last Jedi, and suddenly the spark was smothered. Questions became punchlines, characters were shoved aside, and the careful groundwork was replaced with twists that felt more like jabs at the audience than genuine storytelling. For some this was bold, for others it was betrayal. But either way, the momentum collapsed. The clash between these two films left the sequels without direction. One movie promised answers, the next mocked the idea of asking. Instead of a trilogy building tension and payoff, it became a tug-of-war played out on the biggest stage in cinema. Fans did not just feel disappointed, they felt whiplash. And that whiplash has defined Star Wars ever since. Debates raged not about characters, but about creative choices. Was The Last Jedi visionary or destructive? Was The Force Awakens too safe, or exactly what was needed? Those questions linger because the sequels never found a shared vision. In this video, we are going to explore how The Force Awakens laid strong groundwork, why The Last Jedi unraveled it, and what that clash of visions did to Star Wars forever. When The Force Awakens released in 2015, it felt like Star Wars had returned from the dead. After years of prequel debates and an entire decade without a proper saga entry, Episode 7 brought back the galaxy far, far away with a fresh coat of paint. Right from the opening, crawl fans were locked in because the movie promised mystery adventure and a new generation of heroes. It was simple but effective, and that was exactly what the franchise needed at that moment. Rey, Finn, Poe, and Kylo Ren were not carbon copies of the old characters, but they echoed them in the smart ways. Rey, as the scavenger hero, had shades of Luke. Finn, as a runaway stormtrooper, was a brand new idea, and Kylo Ren played like a dark reflection of Anakin. Audiences did not know where these characters would go, but they wanted to see it. That investment mattered because Star Wars had always thrived on character-driven drama, even when the plots were messy. The Force Awakens also planted deliberate mysteries that kept fans buzzing. Who is Rey? Why did Luke vanish? What is Snoke's ultimate plan? These were not deep answers in the movie itself, but they were enough to fuel speculation for 2 years. It was marketing brilliance because it made every conversation in fan circles about the future of Star Wars, not the flaws of the film. Even people who thought the movie was too safe admitted they were curious. And speaking of being safe, yes, Episode 7 borrowed heavily from A New Hope. Desert scavenger meets droid, meets mentor, meets Starkiller base. But that was the point. It was designed as a soft reset for audiences burned out by the prequels. J.J. Abrams wanted to remind fans why they loved this galaxy in the first place. You can call it nostalgia bait, but it worked because it gave people an emotional bridge from the original trilogy to the sequels. The film also nailed its tone. It felt like Star Wars again. The humour was natural, the action was exciting, and the lightsaber duel in the snowy forest was raw and personal, instead of over-choreographed. Finn screaming, "Come and get it!" at Kylo Ren may not be Jedi poetry, but it gave the fight human stakes. That balance of fun and sincerity made the movie rewatchable in a way that some prequels and sequels are not. Another smart choice was the way it used legacy characters. Han Solo was not just a cameo, but a crucial piece of the story. His mentorship of Rey and Finn, and his tragic death at the hands of Kylo, gave weight to the new cast. Leia's presence tied the Resistance to the old rebellion, and Luke's absence created a sense of mythic anticipation. The baton was being passed, but with care. That was exactly what Episode 7 needed to do to set up the future. The Force Awakens also re-energized the cultural conversation. Star Wars was suddenly cool again. Toys sold out midnight premieres drew crowds, and people who had never seen the prequels showed up to meet BB-8. Disney had accomplished what it wanted. They reignited the brand and convinced people that this was the start of something big. All Episode 8 had to do was build on it. Even the criticisms of Episode 7 could have been solved by a sequel that pushed forward. Rey being overpowered could be explained by her lineage. Snoke being vague could lead to a shocking backstory. Finn being sidelined at the end could lead to him growing into a resistance leader. The setups were there waiting to be paid off. That is why, despite its flaws, The Force Awakens worked. It gave the ball to the next director, and all he had to do was run with it. The Last Jedi walked into theatres with a mountain of expectation, and instead of building on Episode 7, it seemed determined to burn the blueprint. For some fans this was thrilling, but for many it felt like betrayal. The movie took every question set up in The Force Awakens and either dismissed it, mocked it, or twisted it into something unrecognisable. That might have worked in a smaller franchise, but in Star Wars, where continuity and payoff matter, it was devastating. Take Rey's parentage. The Force Awakens practically screamed that her identity mattered. Entire theories filled forums for 2 years. Was she a Skywalker, a Kenobi, a Palpatine, or something else entirely? Then, The Last Jedi shrugged and said she was nobody. Now on paper that twist has potential. The idea that heroes can come from anywhere is powerful. But the way it was executed felt like the rug was pulled out just to shock the audience. It was less about storytelling and more about dunking on expectations. Snoke was another casualty. In Episode 7, he was positioned as this Dark Emperor figure, with clear ties to the First Order. Fans expected some big reveal or at least an explanation. Instead, he was killed off halfway through Episode 8, with no backstory, no context, and no legacy. Imagine if Return of the Jedi killed off the Emperor in the first act, without even hinting at his history. It would feel hollow, and that is exactly what happened with Snoke. His death was shocking, but not satisfying. Then there is Luke Skywalker. The hero of the original trilogy reduced to a bitter recluse who considered murdering his nephew in his sleep. Now there is room for exploring flawed heroes and trauma, but the execution here undercut everything Luke represented. This was the man who refused to kill Vader even when the galaxy demanded it, and now we are supposed to believe he thought about stabbing a teenager. It was character assassination dressed up as subversion. Fans did not reject flawed Luke. They rejected inconsistent Luke. Meanwhile, Finn, who was set up as one of the most unique characters in Star Wars, got sidelined into a filler subplot. His journey to Canto Bight felt like a detour from a completely different movie. Instead of developing him into a resistance leader or a Jedi trainee, the film wasted his arc on horse races and moral lectures. Poe was treated the same way. Instead of evolving into a commander, he was scolded like a child for the entire runtime. The new trio that The Force Awakens had built simply did not exist in this movie. Even the humour shifted. Episode 7 had jokes that felt organic. BB-8's lighter thumbs-up Finn, awkwardly lying to Han. But Episode 8 filled scenes with Marvel-style quips that broke tension. Poe prank calling Hux at the start felt like a parody sketch, not the opening of a Star Wars movie. Luke tossing the lightsaber over his shoulder was played for laughs when it should have been a powerful, dramatic beat. The tone was jarring and it killed momentum. And then there is the pacing. The Last Jedi runs 2.5 hours, yet somehow feels longer because so much of it goes nowhere. The Resistance spends the movie stuck in a slow speed chase, while every subplot either fizzles out or ends in failure. That might be bold on paper, but on screen it feels like treading water. Compare that to The Empire Strikes Back, where every subplot escalated tension until the climax. The Last Jedi just spun its wheels until the credits. Now defenders of the film will argue that subverting expectations was the point. That Rian Johnson wanted to challenge the formula and make Star Wars unpredictable again. And there is merit to that argument. But unpredictability only works if it still feels true to the characters and the universe. The Last Jedi often felt like it was mocking both. It was not evolution, it was demolition. The clash between The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi reveals something bigger than just two movies disagreeing. It exposed the lack of a plan for the sequels and how dangerous that can be for a franchise built on long-form storytelling. In most sagas, Each entry builds on the last, but here, Episode 8 seemed to actively dismantle Episode 7's setup. That disconnect turned the sequels into a tug-of-war rather than a trilogy. Consider how other franchises handle continuity. The Marvel films at least attempt to carry plot threads from one movie to the next, even if imperfectly. Lord of the Rings had one unified vision across 3 films, but the sequels felt like a creative baton pass without a shared finish line. Abrams set up mysteries, Johnson dismissed them, and Abrams returned in Episode 9, scrambling to resurrect what had been discarded. It was less a trilogy and more a debate in movie form. The result was chaos in tone and story. One film celebrated nostalgia, the next mocked it. The final one doubled down on fan service. Instead of a smooth arc, we got whiplash. And that inconsistency is what damaged the brand more than any single creative choice. Star Wars can survive bad movies, but it struggles with fractured identity. The sequels never agreed on what story they were telling. This creative tug-of-war also hurt the characters. Rey's journey went from mysterious prodigy to nobody to secretly a Palpatine. Finn went from runaway stormtrooper to background comic relief. Kylo Ren went from conflicted villain to accidental main character because he was the only one with a consistent arc. These shifts were not natural growth, they were rewrites disguised as development, and audiences felt the disconnect because it played out in real time. And that inconsistency killed trust. When fans debated The Force Awakens, they speculated with excitement because they assumed payoff was coming. After The Last Jedi, that excitement turned into dread. People stopped asking what would happen and started asking if anything would matter. That is the worst possible mindset for a franchise built on serialized storytelling. Once you lose faith in the destination, the journey feels pointless. But here is the irony. The Force Awakens did its job. It reignited interest, created new heroes, and launched a billion theories. The Last Jedi did not just subvert that, it erased it. And because Episode 9 was forced to backpedal, the trilogy ended up collapsing under the weight of its own contradictions. Instead of 3 movies building momentum, we got 3 pulling in opposite directions. It was a recipe for failure, baked into the production itself. The tragedy is that both approaches had merit. The Force Awakens leaned on nostalgia but offered new characters with potential. The Last Jedi challenged the formula, but did so in a way that alienated half the fan base. If those visions had been reconciled with a plan, maybe the sequels could have been bold and coherent. Instead, they were bold and incoherent. The difference between reinvention and contradiction is planning, and that is what Star Wars never had. In hindsight, the sequels serve as a cautionary tale. You cannot run a multi-billion-dollar franchise without a roadmap. Star Wars became a case study in how not to handle long-form storytelling. The Force Awakens worked because it set up questions. The Last Jedi destroyed that by refusing to answer them. And The Rise of Skywalker stumbled by trying to answer everything at once. It is a trilogy defined not by story, but by conflict behind the camera. So when fans argue about these films, they are not just debating characters or plot twists. They are debating the identity of Star Wars itself. Was it meant to be mythic adventure, nostalgic comfort, or daring subversion? The sequels never decided, and so they became all of them, and none of them at the same time. That is why The Force Awakens worked until The Last Jedi destroyed it, and why the trilogy will always feel like wasted potential more than completed story.
Thank you for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that share button. My main channel is Critical Analysis Hub, where I post Star Wars content about the movies. My secondary channel is Critical Analysis Hub Plus, where I focus on the shows of Star Wars. And my third channel is Critical Analysis Hub XP, where I post comic books. Be sure to take a moment and check them out. Thanks, and may the Force be with you.